and welcome to GameSack. Again, we're talking about some games that push the hardware limits of the console that they run on.
Yeah, this is our 4th episode of this, and honestly, I didn't think we'd get past number 2, because I'm like, well, there can't be that many games, but there are. We're still finding games that push hardware limits.
And there are a lot of different consoles which have games that push their limits. Mm-hmm. And with that said, let's get right into it. Ginga Fukai Densetsu Sapphire for the PC Engine CD, TurboGrafx CD, Turbo Duo, or any of the console's many names is one of the more technically impressive games for the system. This one requires the arcade card, but this card only adds extra RAM, not any hardware power. This one is a vertical shooter, and it tries to do with this genre what Gate and Lords of Thunder did with horizontal shooters. While I'd say that the game isn't even a fifth as good as those, it's still extremely fun and pulls off some nice tricks. You may even notice some polygonal enemies attacking you in different stages. These look pretty cool, but they're not actually polygons. Instead, they're digitized sprites. Yes, just like Donkey Kong Country. In fact, this game is full of digitized sprites like that, and they look really, really good. It's rare that I like this graphical style, but here it works quite well, largely due to the system's wide color palette. It looks so much better than any Genesis or Sega CD game that tried digitized sprites, that's for damn sure. They all move around very quickly, and some of them are impressively large. But that's not all that this game pulls off. Keep in mind that the TurboGrafx only has one page of backgrounds that it can put on the screen at any given time. Yet this game shows overlapping layers of scrolling from time to time. What's more is that sometimes you'll come up against the wall of a building and it'll give a parallax effect that looks like scaling, and technically it is, but only in the vertical dimension. It still looks really cool, and it only adds to the impressive features of the game. Not only that, but the detail and the colors everywhere are outstanding. The music is also nearly as good as that in Lords of Thunder. If there's one drawback here, is that the bosses flash too much when you're attacking them, and it can make it hard to appreciate their graphic detail. This is a rare game, but there are bootlegs floating around all over the place, so don't pay more than $50 for it no matter how real it looks. I'm serious. Soulstar just might be the most technically impressive game on the Sega CD. I know we've shown this in the Sega CD episode and also briefly in the Genesis/Mega Drive Shoot 'em Ups episode, but it definitely needs the spotlight here as well, as it really does push the Sega CD. In fact, Core Design always pushed the Sega CD like nobody's business, and this was their best effort for sure. And what we're here to admire is how Core was able to get this kind of scaling and rotation performance out of the system. I mean, you've got backgrounds and sprites scaling all over the place like crazy. Keep in mind that the Super Nintendo could only scale backgrounds in the hardware, and the Neo Geo could only scale sprites. That's right, this game couldn't be done on either the Super Nintendo or the Neo Geo. Some levels even have Mode 7 style scaling and rotation. This one, for example, has a wavy underwater line scroll applied to everything, even the sprites. You don't see a wavy line scroll applied to everything on screen very often. Large objects animate as they scale towards you, even changing their color palette. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but for the Sega CD, it really is. The underground level even has a ceiling and walls at the edge of the area. And it all runs at a respectable and very playable frame rate as well. You've got to keep in mind that the Sega CD is processing all of this and simply sends the entire thing as a background page to the Genesis, which displays it. And there's only so much bandwidth here, and that really slows down how many frames per second there can be on the system. But to have so much going on and still be playable is amazing. Gameplay-wise, it's an acquired taste, and most people won't know what to do in this first free-roaming stage. But once you learn it, it's a great game. They were also making a version of Soulstar for the 32X here, and also for the Jaguar that promised to improve on the visuals. Sadly, it was cancelled before development got very far, but I would have loved to see how it turned out. But the Sega CD version's complete, so at least you can enjoy this. And speaking of the 32X, here's Darkseid. This one was only released in Europe, and presumably they love the hell out of it over there. This pushes what the 32X can do with 3D visuals. All of the polygons are texture mapped, and that's almost unheard of on the system. There's even some light source shading going on, and I've got to say that's pretty impressive. Too bad the frame rate is so low, but I'm still surprised they were able to do it. As a game, it's absolute crap. Your goal is to fly around and destroy all of the meteors and aliens indicated by the little dots on your radar. Do that and then you'll dock back at the base. From there, you'll promptly fail the mission and then be sad that you probably paid a very inflated price for this game. But the better 32X game with textures is Metalhead. This is actually a pretty fun mech game. Yeah, that's right, a good game on the 32X. Everything here is textured and it moves at better frame rates than Darkseid does. It even has some texture warping like the PlayStation, so that's gotta count for something. The draw distance isn't huge, but it's good enough, and considering the system, everything's pretty good. You can play the game from a first-person or third-person view, it's all up to you. Oh, and the game even has a fully voiced intro.
With several fully armed men, the terrorists soon overtook an entire country.
Actually, there's a ton of voice here for a cartridge game. And that cartridge game has
24 mega power. Sexy.
All in all, this game delivers in both graphics, sound, and gameplay. It's not perfect, but it's one of the best on the 32X and truly a hidden gem. A hidden gem? Well, I think that might be my kind of game.
You got the point? I got the equipment. What do you want?
Here's Jikyu Oshaberi Per Odious by Konami for the Super Famicom. If that name doesn't ring a bell, then maybe Chatting Per Odious might. And if that doesn't ring a bell, then I don't know what to tell you. Firstly, I've got to say that I love this game. The first time that I played it with the stick figure character Soitsu, I was laughing so hard. I mean, just check out his bombs, which are just other stick figures on the first level. Once they hit the ground, they start dancing to the music uncontrollably and not doing their job at killing enemies. I literally paused the game because I was laughing so hard. So what makes this game so hardware pushing, you ask? Well, the title of this game, Chatting Per Odious, should give you a hint. You see, as you play, there's an announcer that talks to you through the whole game. Now, I don't speak or comprehend Japanese, but from what I gather, the announcer's commentary is telling you how you're doing and saying things that help you out and stuff like that. It's all very clear and not muffled, and it just sounds great. Not to mention the sheer amount of voices that have been packed onto this cartridge. I guess it's a good thing that it's all in Japanese, or I might get bored of all the speech. But since I can't understand what he's saying, everything he says sounds different, so it's all good. Now, it's got to be noted that this game does make use of the SA1 chip. This offers improved CPU clock speed, faster RAM, which is important for the voices, and even new mappers. Using this chip makes sense, since besides the constant voices, there's so much stuff going on all the time with this game that the Super Nintendo would freeze up if it didn't have a little help. Regardless, it's a very impressive game, and yes, it does have a bit of slowdown, but still you'd have a very hard time finding another game on the system with as much action as this title. Staying on the topic of great voices, let's take a look at a couple of NES games. The first one is Bible Buffet, which is an unlicensed game by Wisdom Tree. This game is a mix of a board game and an action game. You spin the wheel and your character moves the allotted spaces. You then go into an action sequence where you collect food for the food bank. All it did was make me want to go to McDonald's and get some French fries. Luckily, I'm not playing this game for fun because, well, there's really none to be found here. I'd rather play Green Dog on the Genesis than this. That's how bad it is. But it does have one thing going for it, and that is the clarity of the voice samples in the game.
4.
There's not a lot of them, but what is here is some of the best you'll hear on the system.
Player 1.
It's fairly impressive, technically.
3.
Another crappy NES game that has good voice samples is Skate or Die 2 from Electronic Arts. The title screen has someone saying Skate or Die multiple times while a digitized electric guitar is being played for the music. It doesn't sound like an electric guitar to me, but hey, it is what it is, and I applaud Electronic Arts for their efforts in using the NES to its fullest. There's other voice samples throughout the game that are easily the best part of this dreadful experience.
Yo, dude.
Yes, the gameplay is just bad and you'll die many times trying to figure out how to get better skateboards so it doesn't feel like you're skating in maple syrup. Oh great, now I want pancakes. Anyway, it's just too bad that this game doesn't live up to the quality of the voice samples, or I would have been all over it back in the day. Skate or die? I'll take death, please.
Major bummer, dude.
The Last of Us from Naughty Dog is probably one of the most technically impressive games on the PlayStation 3. You play as Joel and some form of airborne virus or something breaks out, turning everyone into zombies. And of course, the game doesn't call them zombies, they call them clickers. But come on, let's face it, they're zombies, no matter how much the writers try to write their way around that word. And of course, naturally, they're all pissed off and really want to kill the non-zombies. The first 20 minutes of the game are very intense as all hell is breaking loose and you're trying to escape town with your daughter and some other dude that you know. Unfortunately, things don't pan out very well. We cut to 20 years later and now everything is under martial law. Different factions have formed and the currency is ration cards. You spend a lot of the time walking around and stuff. Sometimes you get to fight enemies Uncharted style, but the game actually prefers that you use stealth. That's certainly not something I prefer though. You can use different tactics to distract your enemies, be them humans or zombies. Joel also has a superpower which lets him hear through walls and visualize silhouettes of people and things on the other side. The dude is probably 50 years old, there's no way in hell his hearing is still that good. You can do close quarters combat as well. Eventually, you're tasked with transporting an Ellen Page lookalike out of town. Well, at least she used to look like Ellen Page the last time I played this, but I don't know. You're not initially told why you need to escort her. Anyway, the game obviously uses a variation of the engine used in the Uncharted games on the system. The environments are richly detailed and quite realistic looking for the system, perhaps almost like an early PS4 game. It's stunning to look at, and sometimes you just want to take some time to admire things. The wrecked urban chaos both inside and out of the cities really comes to life here. As typical with Naughty Dog, there's some motion blur applied to the movements, which gives it a more cinematic feel. It's amazing how far the graphics on the system have come, and Naughty Dog certainly took advantage of every trick they learned along the way. The sound design is, of course, also very well done and sound great in surround. If you want to play it for yourself, this looks fantastic for the system, but a slightly more enhanced version also exists on the PS4. Elite for the NES by Imagineer was only released in PAL territories. This one is a space adventure game starring you as the commander of a cargo ship. There's lots of places to go and things to buy and trade. Obviously this was ported over from various computer versions, and for an NES game it's pretty damn impressive. You'll first notice the vector graphics which show 3D models of the ships and whatnot. Sure, it doesn't look quite as good as something you might see on the PlayStation 4, but it's really close. Yes, I'm kidding. But still, it's really cool that this is being done. It can get a bit choppy, but hey, come on, this is the NES. It's only running at 1.79 MHz for crying out loud. Actually 1.66 MHz since this is the PAL system. As a game, I can't get into it and I really don't want to put forth the effort to figure out what to do, but hey, maybe you'll like it. However, whether it's fun or not is not the reason why it's in this episode. It's to show you the awesome vector graphics the system is doing. Oh, and don't go expecting this to run on your NTSC NES, otherwise you'll get this. It only runs on the PAL system with this lower refresh rate. Alright Dave, I hope these consoles are not under a whole lot of stress running these games. I hope it's not physically imposing for them.
You know, I felt mine, they didn't seem to be overheating or anything like that, but that I don't know if that's a sure sign, but whatever.
Anyway, let's just get back to these games.
Panorama Cotton for the Japanese Mega Drive. Developed by Success and released by Sunsoft in 1994, this game sheds its side-scrolling action to be a full-on Space Harrier-style shooter. Success really pushed the Mega Drive hard, and for the most part, the console handles the game very well. The background and sprite scaling and warping are some of the best you'll see on the system. It's quite impressive, but what's even more impressive is that with this plus all the sprites on the screen at any given time, there's really no slowdown to mention. Hell, if there is, I don't notice because I'm so engrossed in the gameplay. Another thing that boggles the mind is the fluidity of the game when the levels twist and turn. At one moment, you're going forward and then you start going right and then forward again, and it does it all very quickly and very smoothly. Whoa! Or you're traveling in a tunnel and you can choose to take different routes going up or down at certain points, and it's all handled perfectly. You've even got cool water reflection effects and more. Not to mention that the colors are extremely well done for the system. It really is a unique looking game that stands out thanks to its visuals. You think this one has a helper chip in the cartridge, but nope. It's a late release for the console, so clearly the programmers knew a lot of tricks by the time this one was made. The music is like an opioid for your ears as well, with high quality sampled percussion and great melodies that you just can't get enough of. My respect for the Genesis went up a notch when I saw this, but it's still pretty low in general though. Just kidding, I love the Genesis. Panorama Cotton is one of those games that is totally worth playing any way you can, and be prepared to be impressed. How about Okami HD on the PlayStation 3? Originally released on the PS2 by Clover Studios, this game was amazing and I loved it and played it from beginning to end and never felt unsatisfied. Back in 2012, a company by the name of Hexadrive remastered the game in HD. But what they released wasn't just your normal remaster, simply making it widescreen with more resolution. Yes, they did both of those, but they did so much more and really took advantage of the PS3. The game renders at a native 1080p and has an internal resolution that's almost 4K. Basically, that means it's sampling from a much higher resolution than the game runs at to create its 1080p visuals. It's not rendering the scene in nearly 4K and then downscaling it to 1080p, it's just that the source is nearly that resolution. As a result, the textures are incredibly high resolution, so that even when you're extremely close to them, there's still a ton of detail instead of losing definition like so many other games do. And I'll tell you that the end result is just beautiful. The colors in this game are the most vivid I've ever seen on the PS3. The deep greens of plants and trees to the deep purples and oranges of backgrounds all look fantastic and vibrant when you're doing battle. Everything here looks so much better than the original, and the original was not exactly ugly. At all. Sadly though, the game only runs at a constant 30 frames per second, but I got used to it pretty much immediately. It certainly doesn't interfere with the gameplay. In December of 2017, there will be another release of Okami HD on the PS4, Xbox One, and PC, and that one will offer 4K support on the non-amateur versions of those consoles. There's really no reason not to pick up this amazing title for the first time or even the third time like me. Yep, 3 times for me, and I'm okay with that.
This is Days of Thunder on the original Game Boy. It's a racing game developed by Argonaut which has some vector-style 3D graphics. And it's pretty ambitious for the handheld. Your goal in life is to drive around in a counterclockwise oval. You'll likely never press right on the D-pad here. First, you're going to need to qualify, and that takes over 3 laps. This determines your starting position in the real race. And once you get to the real race, you have to compete against actual opponents. And be careful, because it can be easy to crash when passing here. The frame rate isn't bad at all when you're qualifying. Everything feels responsive, if just a touch floaty. During the actual race, things slow down as there are 19 other cars on the track now. These cars are all represented as bitmapped graphics instead of vectors. Days of Thunder on the Game Boy isn't a great game, but at least it's better than the movie. Moving up to the Game Boy Color, we've got Street Fighter Alpha. 8-bit fighting games that play well are almost unheard of, especially ones on portable systems. Well, here's one. You have 10 characters to choose from, and they're all pretty good. The fighting action is fast and very responsive, and pretty much all of the moves are here at your disposal. You have 2 choices for control, punch and kick, or kick and punch. There's even 2 turbo speed options in here, though honestly I couldn't tell much of a difference. Regardless, the game moves quickly and is by far the best fighter I've played on such a low-tech device. Even the graphics and animation are pretty good for what it is. You want hyper-intense criminal underworld 3D action? Then look no further than Driver 3 on the Game Boy Advance. Basically, this is a Grand Theft Auto ripoff, kinda. It takes place in a fully 3D structured world with polygons which you don't see very often on the Game Boy Advance. You play as an undercover cop. Don't worry though, you can still steal any car you want and kill people without any repercussions. You can only run over innocent people though, you can't actually shoot them, and that might make you sad. Since the game's called Driver, of course you're going to do a lot of driving, mainly just to get from point A to point B to accomplish your missions. Sometimes though, you get into intense gunfights with evil criminals. And if you run out of ammo, no problem, just wander around town until you find some more. The criminals will be waiting for you right back at the original location to continue the gunfight. The fact that most everything in this world is built with polygons is pretty impressive. Yeah, there's a lot of warping going on, actually a hell of a lot of warping, but again, that's gotta count for something, right? The game is completely playable with a surprisingly good frame rate, especially for the time. The game itself is decent, but not insanely great. Many of the missions are really easy, except for the ones where you need to follow a car. If it goes over the horizon, you fail. But they let you keep trying until you get it right, and that is much appreciated. Just be sure to pick this one up if you love warping textured polygons on your Game Boy Advance.
This is Tetris Star the Fighter on the Famicom, developed by Home Data and released by Taito in 1991. I'm playing a patched version with English text so I can understand what's going on in the story since it's actually pretty interesting. So aliens are here to destroy Earth and they're starting off in New York City. Yeah, you won't have any of that, so you get in your Tetris Star Fighter to save New York and retrieve the robot dog navigator Omega. You then take the fight to the aliens' homeworld because that's what badass starfighters do. See, I told you the story was interesting. No? Oh well. Anyway, it doesn't take long for you to see that the game is fairly impressive to look at for the system. I really like the pseudo 3D effects of the scaling ground and things in the background. The levels are fun to play, and even though they have the same effect on the ground, they still feel very different. Even the stars in the distance of this level are scrolling upwards, which just adds to the effects. Ideas like this one really make the game look sharp. And for the most part, there's no slowdown. Oh, and check out the nice line scrolling effect after you defeat the second boss. The poor NES is struggling with it, but it still looks like something you're used to seeing in a 16-bit game, not an 8-bit one. The soundtrack also needs to be mentioned as it has lots of classical music which strangely fits the gameplay. So yeah, this game was a nice little surprise. It's definitely fun and has lots of character on its own, but the special effects really make this game stand out. Home Data did an excellent job pushing the Famicom and finding out what its capabilities are. Here's Moon Crystal for the Famicom by Hector, which is another game that's quite impressive to take in. Again, I'm playing a patched version with an English translation, so I know what's going on. All the people in your village have been abducted by an unknown group. Then at some point your dad gets abducted by Count Crimson, who wants to use the Moon Crystal to raise the dead. So off you go to save your dad and the Moon Crystal from the Count. It's a good storyline that's displayed throughout the game. Even the cutscenes are impressive with their scrolling backgrounds. The most impressive part though is how much animation every sprite here has for a game on the console. When you're used to games that have maybe a few frames of animation for character movement, and then you play this game where everything has a lot more, it makes you go, wow, this is crazy! Well, at least that's what I did. But of course, when you have this amount of animation, it's gonna make controlling your character that much harder. You can't turn around as fast as you'd like because you have to wait for your character's animation to finish. The same goes for ducking and jumping. These small actions need to be planned out a bit in advance. It's like playing Prince of Persia with how you have to approach the controls. It's definitely frustrating at times, but it is something that you can get used to. But you know what? The game is still fun. So not only is there tons of fluid animation, but there's levels with lots of layers of parallax scrolling. It's very impressive to me to see the NES handling all this with no problems whatsoever. Whoa, this is amazing! How is it possible? This is one game that I wish I would have known about a long time ago, as it's stupidly expensive now, so I guess I'll just have to play on my EverDrive. Alright, there you go, another batch of games that push consoles to the limit. I mean, will there be a part 5 of this? Let us know. You gotta list some games down there. What do you think we'll have a part 5?
I sure hope so, because I really like doing these. I like looking at games that just, squeeze a little bit more out of the console than you'd otherwise expect. And take a look at our other 3 episodes in this series and let us know if there's any others that you feel push limits that we haven't covered yet. And until then, thanks for watching GameSack. Oh, hey, Dave. Thanks for coming to this impromptu GameSack meeting.
Yeah, sure. Hey, I had to take a sick day, but whatever, I'm here.
Well, Dave, I think it's time that I do GameSack on my own. The reason being that, honestly, you're just really, really mean to me.
What? Is that what you think, really?
Yes, that's exactly what I think.
Well, if you let me go, I'm gonna cut you, buddy.
And I was also thinking that perhaps we could treat this as a warning, and due to your good work these last few episodes, perhaps you would enjoy this copy of Snatcher on the Sega CD.
I would enjoy that. You know what? I'll see you next episode.